So sometimes on the channel I get objects or, earbuds that are not necessarily meant for gaming, but I guess that's basically every IEM that I test. It's not really meant for gaming, but I test it anyway for gaming. And so sometimes a company's like, hey, you want to check out these wireless earbuds? And, I look at them. They're not exactly meant for gaming, but I'm sure some of you out there are going to probably try it anyway. So that being said, I have the SoundPeats Opera 03 and 05, which haven't come out yet, but we get a preview of what they're going to sound like, so let's talk about it. Now, of course, these were sent out to me for review, but this won't affect my review in any way, shape, or form. Everything you're going to hear here is my own personal opinion. This is going to be more of, I want to say it's going to be more of a gaming-focused review, but honestly, these aren't really made for gaming. I'll talk about that later. So I guess we will be focusing a bit more on the sound, and then I'll tell you why, what's with the gaming situation on these guys, and we'll find out. So let's get started. Alright, now starting with the box, it looks almost exactly the same, other than the naming of the 03 and the 05s. Like, literally, the rest of the box is basically the same, and the differences aren't really apparent until you open up the box, where we'll find the cases and the earbuds themselves are actually different colors ever so slightly. The contents otherwise are the same, with the cable, extra ear tips, and of course paperwork. Alright, now regarding the build of the case, it is quite nice being made of metal and plastic, with the metal bit being that shiny bit here you see, where it's inscribed, "Hear your imagination." And this of course applies to both cases, with like the darker case being the 05 and the lighter case being the 03. On the back is the charging port, which is USB-C, but unfortunately we don't have wireless charging, which is sort of a shame, would have been nice. And on the side of either are little pairing buttons. Size-wise, compared to AirPods Pros, it's definitely on the larger side, and definitely on the chunkier side, so there is that in case you're curious about that. Anyways, onto the earbuds inside. They are also very well built, much like the case, being made of a combination of metal and plastic, and they are fairly light in the hand with very nice detailing all around. I must say it is using a rather chunky design, and this is most likely to accommodate the large battery of around 9-ish hours, but with this design they can at least make the inner side small so it can fit in most people's ears, including those with very small ears. Now, something that is a feature on the website is they do use a metal nozzle with a nice metal grill with an interesting design on it. Now, this nozzle is an oval nozzle, which I think is nice because I generally think it fits people's ears better and seals better. Alright, now let's get some things out of the way with these guys being, wireless earbuds, so let's run into those just a little bit. So, these guys here can be used individually, in case you're wondering about that, if you're wondering, if you can only use one side particularly. No, you can use either side singly at a time, so that's good in case you're, using them for, business calls and whatnot, or just, having one in your ear all the time, and then it runs that battery so you can switch to the other one, so, you can do that. They are touch control based, and from my usage with them, the touch controls are actually pretty good. They're quite responsive, so I've had no trouble with the touch controls. So that's honestly pretty good. I don't have to tap it a million times to make sure that it's actually working. They work well, so that's good. Battery life on them is, it's got a whole lot of ratings on the battery life, which I can say are accurate in my testing, but it is a bit variable depending on what codec you're connecting to. So the battery life of the individual earbuds, according to the websites and the box, as well as during my testing, is around 9 hours, but I would also say it's kind of dependent on your volume levels. And the volume levels, if it's around medium to slightly above medium, then yeah, I can expect the 9 hours. And this is with ANC off. So if you have ANC on, you can drop those 9 hours to about 7 to 8, depending on how loud your volume is. If you max out your volume, you can expect less. If you're using the more specialized codecs like LDAC, it is going to be more power consumptive, so it could even drop even further by a whole nother hour, depending on your volume levels. On their Kickstarter website, there are specs on it, but with that kind of stuff, I'd also take a grain of salt because they didn't really tell you what volume levels they were using on these guys. So there is that. Okay, now as for other features, I guess I should point out these are IPX4 rated, so I guess you could technically work out on them just fine. I would be okay maybe in a drizzle, but I wouldn't be running out in a rainstorm with these guys or swimming. So there is that point. The ANC, as I've just mentioned, there is ANC, but I'm gonna be honest, it's not the greatest ANC in the world. It's just if I'm totally honest, it's kind of subpar, but I guess for the $100 range, it is workable, but it's not, don't expect miracles out of the ANC out of these guys. Regarding the Bluetooth connections, it does use Bluetooth 5.3, which is really good, and it does have 2 codecs it runs between, which is SBC and LDAC, which is the super mega fancy one by Sony, I believe. They have really high quality sound, so if you're using LDAC, if you have LDAC, you're gonna get really good sound. I don't know if these necessarily have AAC enabled at all, but the website just says they only have SBC, which is kind of the poopy codec, and LDAC, so it's one or the other. So if you're not on LDAC, you're going to be an SBC, which isn't exactly very great regarding quality and latency wise, so that's kind of unfortunate. This also affects the sound of it. All right, now, well, on the track of sound, let's talk about the sound of the O3s. But actually, before we get started, let's also listen to the mic, because they're actually pretty proud of the mic according to their thing. So let's give it a listen. All right, now here's the mic test. So here's how the microphone's going to sound. Whether you're going to be using the O3s or the O5s, going to use the same microphones. And for what it is, it's pretty decent. Like, this is just how it's going to sound. And while I guess I'm at it, this is how also they look like on my head. As you can tell, they kind of stick out quite a bit due to the design of them. It's like it's quite a lot. But they do try to go for that jewelry like esque kind of look to kind of remedy that. But I do think they stick out quite a bit on my noggin, so there is that. But that aside, this is how the microphone sounds. I guess I should also go into like comfort wise. So comfort, due to how light they are, they're actually quite comfortable in the ear, despite looking huge and sticking out. They aren't very heavy at all. So I think for most people out there, depending on which ear tips, of course, you do use, you'll have a pretty good, comfortable experience with them. I do think it also does attribute to like the ovular ear hole shape it uses, which I personally prefer. It just fits better, feels better, and with that, you also get just better sound because of it, at least in my opinion. Alright, now let's actually get into the sound of these guys. These are the O3s, by the way, in case you're wondering which one I'm holding right now. So the O3s have a warmish kind of sound, so it's going to have more of that bass and like high push, and it is trying to be somewhat like balanced, leaning to not go too hard into each one, so then the recession of the mids isn't super great. You don't get like a V shape as much as like a very gentle U kind of, but the bass boost and like the high boost is definitely there. It's just not so overpowering that it just kills off the mids, which is good. So at the low end of the bass, we're going to get a pretty good reach into the lower bass regions. It pulls up some of those thumpiest sounds. It doesn't have like a super mega deep reach, but it's a pretty decent reach into those lower ranges, and we're going to get a lot of that presence and to give us a good thump. Moving up to the mid and like upper bass, it's not quite as strong as the lower bass, but there still is some punch to it, but it's not nearly as strong as that thump there. So it is going to be more thump than punch when it comes to that lower region. Now it is fairly strong, and it sometimes feels like it, I wouldn't say veils, but like overpowers the lower mids just a bit, so there is a slight recession into the lower mid range, but it starts to come back up as we go to like the mid to the upper mids, in which case we also get more like detail retrieval as we go up the line. Lower down the line at the lower mids, we lose a bit of detailing due to that recession a bit, so it's kind of like, I guess, smoother-ish kind of around that area, but also just kind of repressed in a way. But it once again returns as we go a little bit higher, and this also extends into the highs themselves. The highs, like I said, with the train of like the upper mids to the highs, you get some pretty good, decent like detail retrieval, so that's good. But I would say the details aren't super in your face, at least if you're using like SBC. If you are on, say, LDAC, this changes the sound profile overall a bit, which I'll get to in a little bit, but let's get into it in currently like SBC. So with the highs, it does go fairly high up, but it does roll off to be safe on the O3s, which I think is a smart decision to do. And this overall gives it a very easy listening, warmish kind of sound that anyone can enjoy. Now, as I was mentioning a little bit earlier, this is when you're listening to it on SBC. If you do use it on LDAC, you get more details. It's gonna like bring it out a little bit more, and it'll be just more expansive in sound, which I'll get to in a bit. So like those lower mid details and whatnot, they come up a little bit, but it's still recessed, so it's like still kind of there, but you're definitely going to get more from there. And overall, the sound is just better because LDAC basically good. Just know that, trust me. Now, before I get into soundstage and imaging on these guys, I also want to get into the Opera O5. The O5s are very similar to the O3s, if I'm being totally honest. These guys are they're very similar, but what's different about them on the inside is they have those the dual balance armature driver, whereas like the O3s only have one. And this does affect the sound more noticeably from like the mid to high ranges. At the bass range, it is almost the same, I'd say, if not the same. You're gonna get more thump than punch. It has a decent reach into the sub bass region. It's very deep. It's a good low range. I like that there. But same thing with the punch. It's not as punchy as it is thumpy. So if you're more punchy in terms of your preference, then just like on the O3s, you're gonna probably want a little bit more. But I think the way they handle it is pretty good for most people. Mid range and the highs. This is where things get a little bit different. You're gonna get more detail in the mid and the high range on the O5s. It's just a little bit more forward-ish in comparison to like the O3s. So with that being said, the lower mids aren't as pushed down. They're not as recessed, so you're gonna get more details out of there. And the same goes as we go up the line. Just overall more details. But there are some issues with that because sometimes the details are a little bit much, and little granular details are just kind of like attacking your ears a little bit. And these things also do go higher on like the highs, so they don't really roll off quite early. They roll off like way out there. But because of that, there were times when I did feel the sound was a bit sharp. So if I were to like summarize the 05s, it's like a brighter version of the 03s, whereas the 03s are more relaxed sound in terms of like easy listening compared to the 05s. Someone who would like a brighter sound would probably want the 05. Someone who's like a more normal person who wants, not normal person, but like more average consumer who isn't too into bright sounds and is more into like bass and just chilling, then the 03s would make more sense. But let's also get into like the sound stage to like kind of like get a little wrap around this. So with both of them, you're gonna get a fairly large sound stage. It's like larger than average for in-ears. The width is definitely much, you know, more than the depth, so it's gonna be like that oval sound signature. No surprise there. Whoops, daisy. We just dropping things here, but don't worry, it's gonna be fine. These are quite durable. Anyway, so we got more width, then we have depth. The height is just, it's okay, it's whatever. That's kind of expected on earbuds for the most part, and headphones even, actually. But when it comes to the precision of sound, like imaging and sound separation, I think due to how the 05s have like the extra drivers, they handle it better. So these are more precise and accurate than the 03s, but the 03s are no slouch. They're still pretty good, but due to how the 05s, just being how they are, you're able to have better sound separation and like home in on sounds much better. The stage feels better handled than the 03s. So there is that on the 05s. Now then, I should also mention, this is if you're on SBC. On LDAC, both of them get much larger sound stages, which is really good, and they both get more precise and better with this with like the imaging. But once again, I still think the 05s take the edge compared to the 03s. It just handles it a lot better. Though, I once again, the 03s aren't like no slouch. But at the same time, this is if you have LDAC, so you have to have LDAC to take advantage of it. If you're like on an iPhone, you're not gonna have it. If you're on Android, you might, depending on what phone you use. So, LDAC, it's nice and all, as you can hear better, well, not hear, as you can tell. I don't know, because you'd have to listen to know, but I'm telling you, with LDAC, you get just much better music quality and sound quality, but it's limited to what devices you're using, of course. Alright, now on the subject of like the whole LDAC codec, let's also get into like gaming and like my thoughts on that. So, when something is usually marketed to have LDAC, it's more focused for music, whether it's going to be for earbuds or like headphones. LDAC is a high quality codec, which gives really good data transfers for really high quality sound. And this is great and all for music. It gives you really high quality sound for music, but typically it's not very good for gaming because the latency on it is usually not very good, because that's usually a sacrifice that will be made. Latency for sound quality. When it comes to either the 03 or the 05s, they could, counteract that by having a gaming mode, but they don't have a gaming mode as much as I know right now. If that's updatable on like their SoundPeats app, which they do have an app for like updates and whatnot and messing with EQs. If their app allows them to like add a gaming mode, that'd be kind of cool. But as of right now, there is no gaming mode. So that being said, in my testing for gamings, it's just not very good for gaming. Whether you're going to be using on phone, Switch, PC, doesn't really matter. I wouldn't really recommend these for gaming just because the latency is not the greatest. You're going to get a bit of lag when you're playing these games, so if you're looking for gaming, for earbuds and whatnot, I would look elsewhere. These are clearly designed for music with no real intention for games, so if you came here hoping to hear that these were going to be any good for games, I'm sorry. But if you do just want really nice sound with a pretty good build, a fairly decent size, fairly good comfort, good battery life with the ability to use LDAC if you want to use that for a pretty good price, then these, maybe one of these could be for you. Definitely if you're going to be more easy listening than the 03s, if you like more details and you like those brightness, then the 05s. But I should also mention, we're currently, as of the making of this video, we're on the last day of its Kickstarter, because these are on Kickstarter. The final day is like I think on the 9th of February. Right now it is the 8th, so I've been trying to rush to like test these things thoroughly and then make a video to review, but here we are on the day before. So if you do want to buy these guys, I'll leave the link down below. It's going to be the Kickstarter thing. I don't know how long it's going to be open left by the time this video goes out, but just rush in there to get it if you really want it. So that being said, that's basically all for today. So I'll see you guys next time.